The alarm clock's harsh buzz cut through the pre-dawn darkness at 5:47 a.m. Ivy Landon's eyes snapped open, her body already moving before her mind fully registered the sound. She silenced the alarm with practiced speed, her movements careful and quiet in the cramped studio apartment where every noise echoed. Across the room, her 7-year-old son Milo slept peacefully on the pull-out couch, his dark hair tousled against the faded pillowcase. His Batman pajamas, a thrift store find from last Christmas, were too small now, but still his favorite. Ivy watched him for just a moment, her heart clenching with the fierce love that had carried her through every impossible day of the past 7 years. The kitchen, if you could call the tiny corner with its ancient refrigerator and 2-burner stove a kitchen, told the story of their life in stark numbers. 3 eggs left, half a loaf of bread, a nearly empty jar of peanut butter that would have to stretch until Friday's paycheck from her part-time cleaning job. The milk carton felt suspiciously light when she lifted it. Ivy opened her wallet with trembling fingers. $12.37. The rent was due in 4 days, and she was still $200 short. Her cleaning supervisor had cut her hours again last week. Budget constraints, he'd said, not meeting her eyes. The rejection letters were stacked on the counter like a paper mountain of crushed dreams. 23 job applications in the past 2 months, all the same response. Thank you for your interest, but we've decided to move forward with other candidates. But today was different. Today was Hargrove Industries. Ivy pulled out the email printout, the paper now soft from handling. We are pleased to invite you for an interview for the Community Outreach Manager position. The words still made her pulse quicken. This wasn't just another job. This was the job. Benefits. A real salary. The chance to move Milo to a better school district. She'd spent weeks researching Hargrove Industries, memorizing their mission statement, studying their community programs. The position seemed designed for someone exactly like her. Someone who understood struggle, who could connect with people others overlooked. Water pressure in their building was always weak, but this morning it barely trickled from the shower head. Ivy washed quickly in the lukewarm stream, her mind racing through her prepared answers. My greatest strength is my ability to build trust with diverse communities, because I understand what it means to need help without wanting charity. The interview outfit hung on the back of the bathroom door. A navy blazer from Goodwill, carefully altered to fit her frame, paired with her only pair of dress pants and shoes she'd polished until they almost looked new. Not expensive, but clean and professional. It would have to be enough. Milo stirred as she tiptoed past, his eyes fluttering open. Mommy, is it time for school? Not yet, baby. Go back to sleep. She knelt beside the couch, smoothing his hair. I have my big interview today, remember? His face lit up despite his drowsiness. The one where you're going to get the good job? With the computer in the office? Maybe, Ivy whispered, kissing his forehead. Cross your fingers for me. I'll cross my toes too, Milo giggled, wiggling under the blanket. Mrs. Chen from next door would watch him before school, just like always. The elderly woman never asked for payment, understanding without words that Ivy couldn't afford it. Small kindnesses from strangers had kept them afloat more times than Ivy could count. In the mirror, she practiced her smile one more time. Not desperate, confident but not cocky, professional but warm. She'd perfected this expression through dozens of interviews, learning to hide the fear that lived just beneath her skin. The manila folder contained copies of her resume, letters of recommendation from the community center where she'd volunteered, and examples of programs she'd developed with zero budget but maximum heart. On paper, her credentials were solid. In person, she knew people saw her worn shoes first and her qualifications second, but not today. Today would be different. Ivy checked the time, 7:15 a.m. The interview was at 10 a.m., but she'd learned to arrive early, to sit in the lobby and observe, to calm her nerves and project the quiet confidence that had carried her through every challenge life had thrown at her. She grabbed her keys, her folder, and the last of her hope. Outside, the city was waking up. People in expensive coats hailing taxis, heading to jobs with health insurance and retirement plans, and the security Ivy had only dreamed of. Today, she told herself, stepping into the morning air. Today everything changes. If you've ever felt like you're fighting an uphill battle just to provide for your family, you're not alone. Drop a heart in the comments if you understand Ivy's struggle. And if this story already has you invested, hit that subscribe button, because what happens next will shock you. Hargrove Industries occupied 17 floors of a gleaming downtown tower, its lobby a cathedral of marble and steel that made Ivy feel like an intruder. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across polished floors where her worn shoes seemed to echo too loudly. Executive assistants in designer suits glided past, their heels clicking with the confidence of people who belonged in this world. Ivy approached the reception desk, her manila folder clutched against her chest like armor. The receptionist, a woman with perfect makeup and jewelry that probably cost more than Ivy's rent, barely glanced up from her computer screen. Ivy Landon, I have a 10 a.m. interview with Mr. Hargrove. 23rd floor, elevator bank to your right. The words were delivered without warmth, as if Ivy's presence was already an inconvenience. The elevator climbed silently, each floor marking her ascent into a world where power lived behind closed doors. Through the glass walls, she glimpsed conference rooms filled with men in $1,000 suits, their voices carrying the authority of people accustomed to being heard. The 23rd floor reception area was smaller, but no less intimidating. Awards and photographs lined the walls, Damien Hargrove shaking hands with politicians, cutting ribbons at charity events, accepting recognition for corporate excellence. In every image, his smile was sharp and calculated, never quite reaching his eyes. Ms. Landon? A thin woman with silver hair and a clipboard materialized. Mr. Hargrove will see you now. The conference room was designed to overwhelm. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of the city below, where people looked like ants scurrying between buildings. The massive oak table could seat 20, but today only 2 chairs were occupied. One at the head for the king of this corporate castle, and one positioned deliberately at a distance for the supplicant. Damien Hargrove entered like a storm front, his presence filling the room before he spoke a single word. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore authority like his custom-tailored suit, perfectly fitted and impossible to ignore. His dark hair was silver at the temples, lending him an air of distinguished ruthlessness. When his steel-gray eyes met hers, Ivy felt examined, evaluated, and found wanting in the space of a heartbeat. Miss Landon. He didn't offer his hand, instead settling into his chair with the fluid grace of a predator. His gaze swept over her blazer, her shoes, her folder, cataloging every detail that marked her as an outsider. Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Hargrove. I'm excited to discuss how my experience in community outreach could benefit your experience. He cut her off, leaning back in his chair. Tell me about this community center work. Volunteer positions, I see. Ivy straightened, drawing on every ounce of confidence she'd practiced. I developed 3 programs that increased youth engagement by 40%. The literacy initiative I created helped over 200 families access educational resources they couldn't afford otherwise. How noble. His tone suggested anything but admiration. And the budget for these programs? We worked primarily through partnerships and donated materials. I learned to maximize impact with minimal resources. Damien's laugh was cold and cutting. Minimal resources. How diplomatic. You mean you had no real budget because no one trusted you with actual money? The words hit like a physical blow, but Ivy forced herself to remain steady. I believe that constraint breeds creativity. Some of our most successful initiatives. Miss Landon. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a tone that somehow felt more threatening than shouting. Let me be direct. This is a prestigious corporation with a reputation built over 3 decades. Our community outreach manager will interface with board members, city officials, and media representatives. They'll attend galas where a single table costs more than most people make in a month. His eyes traveled over her outfit again, lingering on details that made her skin burn with shame. I'm trying to envision you in that environment, representing our brand, our values. I understand the professional standards required. Do you? He stood, walking to the window with his hands clasped behind his back. Because frankly, Miss Landon, I'm not seeing it. Your resume shows dedication, I'll grant you that. But dedication isn't enough when you're asking our stakeholders to take you seriously. The room felt smaller now, the air thinner. Ivy's carefully prepared responses crumbled as she realized this wasn't an interview. It was a performance of her unworthiness. Your references speak highly of your work with. He glanced at her resume dismissively. Food banks and homeless shelters. Admirable, certainly. But running a bake sale is hardly preparation for managing million-dollar community initiatives. The programs I've developed required complex coordination between multiple agencies. I've managed teams of volunteers, secured corporate sponsorships, and created measurable outcomes that— On what scale? His voice rose slightly. How much money did you actually handle? What was your largest budget? Your most significant stakeholder? The questions came like arrows, each one designed to highlight what she lacked rather than what she offered. Ivy felt herself shrinking, her voice growing smaller as she tried to defend accomplishments that suddenly seemed trivial in this marble and steel fortress. I see. Damien returned to his seat, his expression settling into something that might have been pity if it weren't so cold. Miss Landon, I appreciate you taking the time to come in. We'll be in touch. Mr. Hargrove, if I could just explain. That won't be necessary. He was already reaching for his phone, his attention moving past her as if she'd already vanished. My assistant will show you out. Ivy stood on unsteady legs, her folder clutched against her chest like a shield that had already failed. The walk to the door felt endless, each step echoing her defeat. She could feel his eyes on her back, cataloging her retreat with the same clinical detachment he'd shown her arrival. The elevator doors closed on her reflection, a woman who dared to reach above her station and been reminded with surgical precision exactly where she belonged. Have you ever been judged unfairly because of how you look or where you come from? Share your experience in the comments below. And if Damien's cruelty made your blood boil, smash that like button, because this story is about to take a turn nobody saw coming. 3 hours after Ivy Landon left his office, Damien Hargrove still couldn't shake the encounter from his mind. He sat in his leather chair, city lights beginning to twinkle beyond his windows as afternoon faded into evening. The woman's file lay open on his mahogany desk, pages scattered across the polished surface. It should have been simple. Another rejected candidate, another reminder that desperation didn't qualify someone for executive-level responsibilities. Yet something nagged at him, a detail that refused to settle into place. Damien pulled the application closer, studying the personal information section with newfound attention. Ivy Marie Landon, born March 15, 1992. The date struck him as familiar, though he couldn't place why. Her address was in Riverside Heights, one of the city's struggling neighborhoods, where hope went to die slowly. But it was the emergency contact that made him pause. Maria Santos, listed as family friend rather than relative. No parents mentioned anywhere in the documentation. No siblings. For someone applying to a family-oriented community position, her complete lack of blood relatives seemed odd. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Hargrove, your 4 p.m. appointment is here. Cancel it, he said without looking up. Hold my calls. Damien opened his laptop and accessed the company's background verification system. Every applicant underwent basic screening, education verification, employment history, criminal background checks. Ivy's file showed clean results across the board, but he found himself digging deeper into the details most hiring managers would overlook. Her high school records showed a gap. No father listed on emergency contact forms, just a woman named Elena Vasquez who'd apparently served as her guardian. The address was different then, a part-rank apartment complex that had been demolished 5 years ago. Dead ends and missing pieces. He pulled up her college transcripts next. Full scholarship recipient, dean's list every semester. Graduated summa cum laude with a degree in social work and nonprofit management. These weren't the achievements of someone lacking intelligence or capability, yet she'd spent the past 7 years working part-time cleaning jobs and volunteer positions. Why would someone with her credentials be stuck in such circumstances? Damien found himself searching deeper, accessing databases he rarely bothered with. Public records, birth certificates, court documents. The search for Ivy Marie Landon yielded standard results, but when he cross-referenced with her birth date and the limited information available, inconsistencies began to surface. A child welfare case from 1992 caught his attention. An infant placed in foster care after her mother died in childbirth. Father listed as unknown on the birth certificate, but there was a caseworker's note suggesting the father's identity was known but sealed by court order. Damien's chest tightened. March 1992. The timing aligned with memories he'd spent decades burying. He was 28 then, climbing the corporate ladder with ruthless determination. There had been a woman, Elena Vasquez. A brief relationship that burned bright and ended abruptly when his mentor made it clear that certain associations could derail promising careers. Elena had been pregnant when he walked away. His hands shook as he typed her name into the search database. The results confirmed what his memory had tried to deny. Elena Vasquez died March 16, 1992, one day after giving birth to a daughter. Complications from delivery at City General Hospital. Damien stared at the screen, his reflection ghost-like in the monitor's glow. The timeline was perfect. The dates aligned with mathematical precision. Elena had tried to call him twice during her pregnancy, calls he'd ignored on his mentor's advice. She died alone, giving birth to a daughter who would grow up never knowing her father's name. A daughter who had sat across from him that morning, desperate for a job that could change her life. He pulled Ivy's file closer, studying her photograph with new eyes. The bone structure was Elena's, delicate but strong. But the eyes, the set of her jaw, the way she'd held herself with dignity even while being humiliated. Those were his own features, staring back at him. Damien pushed back from his desk, his breath coming in short gasps. For 31 years, he'd convinced himself that walking away had been the right choice, that Elena would be better off without him, that their child, his child, would find a better life somewhere else. Instead, he'd spent his morning destroying the woman who carried his DNA, crushing the dreams of his own daughter while she sat there taking his cruelty with the quiet strength he recognized as his own. The phone on his desk seemed to mock him, its silence echoing with 31 years of calls never made, conversations never had, and a relationship that might have saved them both. What do you think Damien just discovered? Drop your theories in the comments, and if you're still watching, you need to see what happens when he realizes the truth. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Trust me, you don't want to miss this revelation. Damien's hands trembled as he reached for his phone, scrolling through contacts he hadn't accessed in years. Marcus Webb, his old college roommate turned private investigator, the man who handled sensitive inquiries that required absolute discretion. Marcus? It's Damien Hargrove. I need you to run a DNA comparison, immediately. Christ, Damien, it's been what, 5 years? You sound terrible. What's going on? I can't explain over the phone. I need you to pull genetic records for Elena Vasquez, deceased 1992, and cross-reference with her daughter, Ivy Marie Landon. Birthdate March 15, 1992. A pause. Damien, are you asking me to? Just do it. Whatever it costs. I need results tonight. Marcus's voice softened with understanding. I'll make some calls. Give me 2 hours. The waiting felt like drowning in slow motion. Damien sat in his office as the building emptied around him, security guards making their rounds, cleaning crews arriving for the night shift. Every passing minute stretched like torture, filled with memories he'd spent 3 decades suppressing. Elena laughing at his terrible jokes. Elena crying when he told her their relationship had to end. Elena's voice on his answering machine, scared and alone, begging him to call her back. He deleted those messages without listening to them completely. At 11:47 p.m., his phone rang. Damien? Marcus's voice was heavy with something between sympathy and disbelief. You sitting down? Just tell me. Mitochondrial DNA is a perfect match. Ivy Landon is Elena Vasquez's biological daughter, and based on the genetic markers I was able to access through medical databases, there's a 99.7% probability that you're her father. The phone slipped from Damien's grip, clattering against his desk. The numbers and percentages meant nothing compared to the certainty that had already settled in his chest like a stone. His daughter, the woman he'd humiliated that morning, whose dreams he'd crushed with calculated cruelty, was his own flesh and blood. Damien stumbled to the window, pressing his forehead against the cool glass. 31 floors below, the city sprawled in all directions, Millions of lights representing millions of lives. Somewhere out there, in a cramped apartment he could probably buy with pocket change, Ivy was tucking her son into bed. His grandson. A boy he'd never met, would never know. The sob that escaped his throat sounded foreign to his own ears. When was the last time he'd cried? His father's funeral, maybe, or the day he'd first made the Forbes list and realized there was no one left in his life who cared enough to celebrate with him. He thought about that morning's interview, replaying every word with new horror. The way he'd examined her clothes, her shoes, her background, finding them wanting. The dismissive tone he'd used, the cold calculation in his voice as he'd explained why someone like her could never represent his company. Someone like her. His daughter. She'd sat there with quiet dignity, defending programs she'd built with nothing but determination and heart. Programs that helped families exactly like the one he'd abandoned. And he'd torn her down with the same ruthless efficiency he'd brought to hostile takeovers. Damien's reflection in the window showed a stranger, a man whose success had cost him everything that mattered. The awards on his walls, the recognition from peers, the empire he'd built brick by brick, none of it meant anything compared to the family he'd thrown away. He pulled out his phone, scrolling to Ivy's contact information. His finger hovered over the call button. What could he possibly say? How do you apologize for 31 years of absence? How do you explain to your daughter that you knew she existed and chose power over parenthood? The cursor blinked mockingly. No words existed for this magnitude of failure. His office felt like a mausoleum now, filled with the ghosts of choices that could never be undone. Every achievement suddenly felt hollow, every moment of pride tainted by the knowledge of what he'd sacrificed to earn them. Elena had died, believing he didn't care. Ivy had grown up thinking her father didn't want her. A grandson existed who would never know that his grandfather owned half the downtown skyline, but couldn't manage to be present for the people who should have mattered most. Damien sank into his chair, surrounded by the trappings of a success that now felt like the cruelest joke ever played. He'd spent decades becoming exactly the kind of man who would mock a struggling single mother for daring to dream of something better. He'd become the villain in his own daughter's story. Outside his window, the city continued its endless rhythm, indifferent to the man sitting alone in his tower, finally understanding that the greatest failure of his life hadn't happened in any boardroom. It had happened that morning when he'd looked his own child in the eye and made her feel worthless. I can't even imagine the weight of this realization. If this story is hitting you in the feels, show some love with a like. And tell me in the comments, do you think a parent can ever truly make up for decades of absence? Keep watching because their first meeting is about to happen. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under Ivy's apartment door while she was getting Milo ready for school. Heavy cream paper, the kind that whispered of money and importance. Her name was written in careful script across the front, no return address. "Mom, who's that from?" Milo asked, peering over her shoulder as she tore open the envelope. "I don't know, sweetheart. Go brush your teeth." The letter was brief, formal, yet something in the tone made her hands shake. "Miss Landon, I owe you an explanation and an apology that cannot be adequately expressed in writing. If you would allow me the opportunity to speak with you in person, I will be at Riverside Park tomorrow at 2 p.m. near the fountain. I understand if you choose not to come. Respectfully, Damien Hargrove." Ivy read the words 3 times, her coffee growing cold in her hands. The man who had humiliated her, who had made her feel smaller than dust, wanted to meet? Her first instinct was to tear the letter into pieces. But something held her back, a curiosity that overrode her anger. The next afternoon, Ivy found herself walking toward Riverside Park despite every rational thought telling her to stay home. The autumn air was crisp, leaves crunching under her feet as she approached the old stone fountain at the park's center. Damien was already there, sitting alone on a weathered bench. Gone was the intimidating CEO from his corporate tower. This man looked older, smaller somehow, his expensive suit replaced by simple khakis and a navy sweater. His hands were clasped tightly in his lap, and when he saw her approaching, he stood with obvious uncertainty. "You came," he said, his voice lacking any trace of the commanding authority she remembered. I almost didn't. Ivy remained standing, keeping the fountain between them like a barrier. What do you want, Mr. Rep Hargrove? Please, sit. What I have to tell you. He gestured to the bench beside him, but she chose one across from him instead, maintaining distance. Damien's composure cracked slightly. I had you investigated after our interview, not because of anything you did wrong, but because something felt familiar. The timing of your birth, your mother's name. My mother? Ivy's voice sharpened. What could you possibly know about my mother? Elena Vasquez. The name fell from his lips like a confession. I knew her. 31 years ago. The world seemed to tilt. Ivy gripped the edge of the bench, her knuckles turning white. That's impossible. My mother died when I was born. The social worker said my father was unknown. He wasn't unknown. Damien's voice broke on the words. He was a coward. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the gentle splash of water from the fountain. Ivy stared at this man who had torn apart her hopes just days ago, trying to process what he was saying. You're telling me, she couldn't finish the sentence. I'm your father. The words hung in the air like a judgment. Elena tried to reach me when she was pregnant. I ignored her calls because my mentor told me that kind of distraction would destroy my career. I chose ambition over responsibility. Ivy felt something fundamental shift inside her chest, like tectonic plates realigning. All my life I wondered. I used to make up stories about who he might be, what he was like. I never imagined that he was the kind of man who would humiliate his own daughter without knowing it. Damien's laugh was bitter and broken. The irony isn't lost on me. I spent my morning judging you for coming from exactly the circumstances I created. Stop. Ivy stood abruptly, pacing to the fountain's edge. Just stop. You don't get to be the victim here. You don't get to feel sorry for yourself. You're right. I've spent 31 years wondering if I was wanted, if there was something wrong with me that made my father walk away. Her voice rose, drawing glances from other park visitors. I've struggled for everything I have while you've been living in your tower, judging people like me. I know. Do you? She whirled to face him. Do you know that I've worked 3 jobs just to keep Milo and me in that apartment? Do you know that he asks why other kids have grandfathers and he doesn't? Do you know that when you mocked my clothes in that interview, you were mocking a woman who hasn't bought herself anything new in 2 years? Damien stood slowly, his face pale. Milo? My son, your grandson. The words came out like arrows. 7 years old, brilliant and funny and everything good in this world. And he'll never know you because you're exactly the kind of man who would walk away from family for money. Please. Damien took a step toward her, his hands outstretched. I can't undo the past. I can't bring back the years I missed or take away the pain I caused, but I want to try to make things right. How? Ivy's voice was raw with 3 decades of suppressed pain. How do you make right a lifetime of abandonment? I don't know. The admission came quietly. But I want to learn. I want to be the father you deserved, even if it's 31 years too late. For the first time since arriving, Ivy truly looked at him. Behind the wealth and power, she saw something she recognized, the same loneliness that had haunted her own eyes in countless mirrors. I don't forgive you, she said finally. I can't. Not yet. Damien nodded, accepting the verdict. I understand. But, Ivy's voice softened slightly. Milo deserves to know his family, what's left of it. If you really want to try, we start slow. And if you hurt him the way you hurt me, you'll never see us again. Thank you. The words came out as barely a whisper. What would you do in Ivy's position? Could you forgive a parent who abandoned you for 31 years? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you believe in second chances and the power of family, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to Hearts Unbroken for more heartwarming tales of redemption. 6 months later, the Hargrove Industries annual shareholder meeting looked different from previous years. Gone were the predictable presentations about profit margins and market expansion. Instead, Damien Hargrove stood at the podium facing a room full of investors, board members, and media representatives, preparing to deliver the most important speech of his career. Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to talk about failure. Not market failures or strategic miscalculations, but personal failure that has shaped this company's culture for too long. Murmurs rippled through the audience. This wasn't the corporate rhetoric they'd expected. 6 months ago, I conducted an interview that should haunt every leader in this room. I dismissed a qualified candidate not based on her abilities, but on her appearance, her background, her perceived class. I was wrong. More than wrong, I was cruel. Damien's voice carried across the silent auditorium. That woman was my daughter, a daughter I had abandoned 31 years ago, whose existence I had chosen to ignore. The irony is perfect. I built my success on the foundation of abandoning family, then used that success to justify judging others who came from the very circumstances I had created. Cameras flashed as reporters leaned forward. This wasn't just corporate news. This was human drama playing out in real time. Today, Hargrove Industries is announcing fundamental changes to our hiring practices, our community outreach, and our corporate values. We're establishing the Elena Vasquez Foundation for Single-Parent Support, funding childcare, education, and job training programs. We're partnering with community organizations to ensure our hiring process evaluates character and capability, not pedigree. From the back of the room, Ivy watched her father deliver words she'd never thought possible. Beside her, Milo shifted in his seat, still processing the strange reality that the important man on stage was his grandfather. The new director of community transformation will oversee these initiatives, Damien continued. I'm proud to announce that Ivy Landon has accepted this position. The applause was genuine, warm. Ivy felt her cheeks flush as hundreds of faces turned toward her. This wasn't charity or nepotism. Over the past months, she'd proven her worth through pilot programs that had already changed lives in their community. After the meeting, Ivy found Damien in his office, tie loosened, looking simultaneously exhausted and relieved. How do you feel? She asked. Terrified, he admitted. The board is split. Half think I've lost my mind. The other half are calling it the boldest corporate responsibility move they've seen. And you? I feel like I'm finally becoming the man Elena thought I could be. Their relationship remained complicated. Months of careful conversations, supervised visits with Milo, and professional collaboration that slowly, carefully was building something that resembled trust. Forgiveness was still distant, but understanding had begun to take root. Grandpa Damien? Milo's voice piped up from the corner where he'd been coloring. Can you help me with my math homework? The simple request stopped both adults in their tracks. For Damien, it was the first time Milo had asked him for help with anything. For Ivy, it was seeing her slowly accept this complex man into their small family. Damien knelt beside his grandson, studying the worksheet with exaggerated seriousness. Multiplication tables, huh? The secret is patterns. Want me to show you? As she watched them work together, her son's dark head bent close to her father's graying one, Ivy felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but possibility. 3 months later, the changes at Hargrove Industries had made national news. The employee satisfaction surveys showed dramatic improvement. The community programs Ivy had developed were being replicated by other corporations. More importantly, the culture was changing. Hiring managers were trained to look beyond traditional markers of success, and employee resource groups supported workers from all backgrounds. Ivy's apartment had transformed too, though not in ways money could measure. The refrigerator was full, the bills were paid, but more importantly, Milo came home from school each day with stories about the grandfather who attended his soccer games and helped with science projects. He's different when he's with you, Ivy told Damien one evening as they watched Milo demonstrate his latest Lego creation. Softer. He makes me want to be different, Damien replied. Both of you do. The healing wasn't linear or simple. Some days, old wounds reopened. Ivy still flinched when Damien used his commanding CEO voice. Damien still struggled with the years he couldn't reclaim. But they were building something new, not the family they should have been, but the family they could still become. On Milo's 8th birthday, as he blew out candles surrounded by friends from school and his small but growing family, Ivy caught her father's eye across the table. The man who had once made her feel worthless now watched his grandson with the kind of love she'd dreamed of seeing her entire life. Make a wish, buddy, Damien said to Milo. Milo closed his eyes tight, then opened them with a grin. I wished for next year to be even better. For the first time in 31 years, Ivy believed it might be. Change, she had learned, didn't erase the past, but it could transform the future. And sometimes, that was enough. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to make things right. Subscribe to Hearts Unbroken and ring that notification bell for more incredible tales of love, healing, and hope. What story should we tell next? Drop your suggestions below.